Hello and welcome to the EggBanana Podcast. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Mark.
And I'm Edward.
Have you ever experienced discrimination? Have you ever discriminated against someone else? Get ready for an honest, thought-provoking discussion. A couple of days ago, Ryan had mentioned like you had went to a barber shop and you got a haircut.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that's kind of how this whole topic came about. So, could you...
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was interesting. I went to this hair salon nearby my place. Recently, I've been like cutting my own hair and dyeing my own hair, but I thought this time I'm going for blue, so I thought maybe I should hire a professional to do it.
Yes.
But anyways, so I checked out 2 or 3 local salons, and the first one that I went into, they were like, "Oh, it's 600 NT for this service, but." Oh, foreigner? Oh, sorry, it's 700. I was like, wait a second, why is there an extra 100 NT because I'm a foreigner?
A $100 hike because your hair is harder to cut or something, or something else?
That is, yeah, a bit strange.
That's very strange.
Well, probably to do with something like having to communicate with me, maybe, even though that they didn't even find out if I could speak Mandarin or not.
Okay.
You know?
But that's just weird. It's like, our price is usually 600 NT, but we have to charge you an additional 100 because you're a foreigner.
And it was kind of weird because they had this price sheet, but it wasn't properly labeled. So it was like 600, and then to the side it said 700, 800, 900. And I don't know who got the 800 and the 900, but I fell into the 700 category. But normally it's just 600.
Right.
So I was like, I thought that was just really strange. I didn't expect something like that here in Taiwan.
Right.
Yeah,
So going off the tangent, because I know when I meet Taiwanese people, and then they're like, "Oh, you're ABC," so that means this is what they've said. Like, "Oh yeah, you guys are very loud, opinionated, or like you like to party." Like, have you guys encountered any type of like kind of I guess how they just want to put you in like a certain box? Like, Ryan, have you encountered anything like that?
Yeah. Well. Yeah, obviously, I'm not ABC, but...
You're not? Oh,
yeah. Yeah, when I was doing apartment hunting, talked about this the other day with a friend of mine, there was one place that kept reminding me how important it was that they had a tenant who was going to be very quiet. I'm one of the most quiet people. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't have parties at my place, I don't crank up the music or whatever. But she just kept going on and on. Like, she repeated herself multiple times, and in the end, she didn't end up renting it to me because she felt like I'm a foreigner, so probably I'm going to be loud and kind of just disturb the neighbors and things like that. So yeah,
wreck the place.
Yeah.
And put holes in the wall. I got it. Okay.
I don't know if this is considered discrimination, but hearing your story kind of reminded me, there was a few times like I tried to look for apartments, and the landlord would always point out and say, "Oh, the previous tenant that lived here was female." And I was like, and for a while I was like wondering why does that matter? But I feel like what they're trying to point out is like females are clean, and they probably want someone like to be clean, and they're like letting me know they're doing something special because I'm a guy to like let me live here. So
Like
I don't know.
Yeah. Like, I usually deal with clean people, but I'm gonna make an exception and give you a chance. That kind of thing,
it's just like really weird. So,
Ryan, go back to, because I know some of my friends who are foreigners, when they try to rent places, the landlord wants like a Taiwanese person to co-sign. Did you have to deal with any of that ever?
For me, I didn't. Usually they were able to just deal directly with me because I do, I have an ARC and everything, and I have my own company here. So
And
that wasn't...
You're balling and rich. Yes.
Right. So that wasn't a problem. But actually, yeah, I know another foreigner here who doesn't speak any Mandarin, and he was turned away once or twice just strictly because they didn't want a foreigner to rent from them. So... Like I said, it's unexpected for me to see that kind of thing here in Taiwan, but I have seen a little bit of that in other countries. Like, there are some places like in the Philippines or Thailand, like foreigners can't, it's like a law, you can't own land or landed property. Like, you could buy a condo, but it couldn't be on the ground floor. It could be up higher. they needed like a local person to buy it if they were gonna actually.
Sorry, you're saying in Taiwan or
No,
in,
it's
in
like
Asia?
in Philippines,
Oh, okay.
Thailand, some other countries. Taiwan, I'm not too sure if they
Okay.
just sell a house or whatever to a foreigner, but like usually a lot of countries don't sell land to foreigners.
Right. Well, I would say this part because you just made me think about something. When I first came to Taiwan, I was on my U.S. passport. At that time, I didn't have Taiwan citizenship. Now I'm dual citizen. Go me. I remember when I had to sign up for a phone contract, usually they kind of want like a Taiwanese person to co-sign and or you got to put like a heavy deposit because I think they had kind of like a negative experience where people would sign up for the phone, go back to their country and never pay. But then I noticed when I got my dual citizen, when I used my Taiwan ID, they're just, okay, yeah, sure. Two years, no problem. So I do feel like, I don't know if that's discrimination. It's like a little bit more like, I guess,
Privilege.
I don't know if privilege. I guess they just think,
Preferential?
yeah, preferential treatment. They just think, oh, this person's Taiwanese. He's not going to be a delinquent, or like it's a weird way to judge. Or that guy's a foreigner. He's definitely gonna try to like skip out on the bill or something like that. So I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, there is definitely like a higher chance that a foreigner would go back to their home country or something than a local, right?
This is true.
So, yeah.
This is true. Because like think about it. If you go back to the U.S., they're not gonna send like overseas whatever
Debt collector.
CIA and try to hunt you down for that. But yeah.
Yep.
I am kind of curious for Ryan, like, have you experienced anything in Japan? I know you had like lived
Japan,
there
yes.
for like 4 years or so, or maybe Singapore. I know you had lived there as well. So have you had to experience anything?
I would say Singapore, not really at all. Singapore's very multicultural. But for Japan, I would say the only thing that really comes to mind is when it comes to do with like the language. I consider myself to be pretty good at Japanese, but one time I remember I went to catch a train to go somewhere, and I wasn't sure, like there were several different trains, several platforms, and I wanted to make sure I was on the right one, and I just went up to this guy that was there on the platform, and I was just going to ask him like, hey, does this train go here or whatever? And he immediately put his hands over his ears, and he was like,
I can't deal with this.
Yeah, he was so scared that I was speaking English, but I swear I was speaking the most clearest and correct Japanese to him, and he just like wouldn't hear it. He's like, my ears are gonna bleed if I hear what's coming out of this foreigner's
This guy's
mouth.
spewing toxic
So,
venom. Yes.
but apparently this sort of thing is pretty common. Like people see you're like a white guy, for example. They're like, there's no way that this guy's speaking Japanese. He's speaking English to me. I don't speak English, so I'm not even going to pay attention or listen to what he has to say.
Wow.
Yeah, this has happened many times in Japan. In Taiwan, this kind of thing happens to me just every once in a while, but I think that's more like sometimes my pronunciation is not that good, so maybe I'm speaking Mandarin, and then it might take them a minute to realize that I'm not speaking English. And just because, one, they expect me to be speaking English, and then two, my pronunciation is not like perfect, right? So I have experienced that a little bit, but more so in Japan.
Actually, listening to your experience, it kind of just reminded me of something I just now thought of. So I had studied a little bit of Chinese in Fongjia Daxue, and then I had a classmate from Okinawa, and after maybe a year or two, she went back to Okinawa, and I actually took a trip there just to visit her. And we met up a couple times, and we had a long, interesting discussion about the history of Okinawa. And she told me something really interesting. She told me a story that, like, when she was back at Taichung studying Chinese at Fongjia Daxue, so like she was looking for a part-time job, and she tried to work at like a restaurant, and she told me like the owner asked her like where she was from, and she said like from Okinawa, and he assumed it'd be like Japan, and he wouldn't hire her. So, and from what I understand, I think she explained it to me like, I guess here in Taiwan there are some people who older, I guess maybe an older generation, who had migrated from China, and China has a bit of a grudge, I guess, against Japan. So, and that was kind of surprising, like, that there's still kind of a tension between China and Japan. And I remember back in America, I had a roommate from China, and I remember him saying one time, he said like, "Oh, I'm not going to buy any Japanese cars," and I was like thinking to myself like, "Well, why not? I mean, they're like one of the best cars in the world." So, but it is kind of interesting. So, kind of to go back to about the story about my friend from Okinawa, she said something else really interesting. It kind of reminded me a bit of like Taiwan. She told me like if someone asked her like where she's from, she would always say from like Okinawa. She would never say from Japan. So, and I wasn't sure. For you, Ryan, have you heard anything?
Yeah,
like
I think it's
the relationship between like Japan and Okinawa.
Yeah, I guess that some people consider it to be a little bit different than the rest of Japan. I think it might be similar to here. Like sometimes you meet somebody in Taiwan, you ask them where are they from, they're like, I'm from New Taipei City. I'm like, why can't you just say you're like from Taipei? Or like they really want to let you know that they're from New Taipei City.
Yeah, I just had Mark made me think of something when he was talking. You know, it's 2021, I think. I still remain in contact with people in New York. I know WhatsApp group chat, and it's interesting because it kind of connects to two of our topics, discrimination and the last one we did about COVID. So I have two different experiences, and then I could get your thoughts about it. So my friends, most of them are Asian. They were telling me when COVID started happening, and you know, if you look at the news a little bit, the increase of like hate crimes against Asian people have gone up. So that's definitely a form of discrimination. They were telling me like people kind of like, you know, oh, you're from China, you brought that kind of thing, and then they were kind of getting discriminated against. Like if you look at the YouTube, like people are getting attacked, that kind of thing. And then I was like, this is actually more apropos to Ryan. Have you dealt with like, because I remember I was at MRT, I'll make it really quick. And then all of a sudden this older gentleman, Taiwanese person, just started yelling at this white couple. And it was just like, oh, what are you doing here? You brought COVID, da, 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 da. And it was weird. Everyone's just like looking at their phones and trying to ignore it. And then eventually, you know, because I don't really, whatever. I just said to the guy, it's like, hey, what's your problem? Leave them alone. They have nothing to do with it. And if they did, why are you yelling at them? They have nothing to do with COVID. And he's like, oh, but they're from America. And I said, hey, man, I'm from there too. But then I said immediately, I've been living here 11 years, so I don't think I have COVID, but I have too. So leave them alone. And then he was saying, then I'm gonna call the police on you too. I was like, okay, go ahead. And then he eventually hit the emergency button, and then the train stopped, and then we had to wait. And he's like, you guys are in trouble now. And so I was kind of like, I think discrimination on both sides has, especially like in Taiwan and I guess in America, have kind of been heightened because of that. So I just quickly wanted to get your thoughts about it. Like, have people like said anything to you because you're a foreigner? Like, oh, you brought this here, or do you have COVID? Have you done quarantine? That kind of thing?
I haven't experienced anything like that. I mean, I've worn a mask every day. I feel like there were a lot of foreigners who refused or didn't really want to wear a mask,
Sure.
or, you know, just as soon as they could take one off, they would. I've become like that a little bit more recently because it does seem pretty safe, but there were many times where I was the only one wearing a mask in the room. I was like, okay, why isn't anyone else wearing a mask? So I don't think that anyone's really looked at me like that, but I remember seeing a video recently where some foreigner on a train refused to wear a mask.
Yeah.
And everybody was they eventually had to have the police come and force her to put on her mask, and she made a big deal out of it. But
I was about to say, Mark, why couldn't you just wear the mask? No, I'm just kidding. Listeners out there, I will test to what Ryan's saying. For a long period of time, he wouldn't even do the fist bump with me. He was very serious about it. He would only do the elbow bump and then the foot bump, I guess is what it's called during those times. So, yeah.
Yep.
That's all the time that we have for today. Stay tuned for our next episode when we talk about the cost of living.
Please be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and other social platforms. It would really help us out.